That's all that is. Right, and you can get so worried about privacy and security. Like, what, it didn't last forever? No. So I like to take the evolutionary view here, right?
Yeah.
So 3.5 billion years, right? Come along, right? It just does, you know, we know all of George Washington's secrets, and does he really care anymore? No, you know,
It's hard to get feedback from
yeah,
him.
let's take a geologic view to everything.
One day you'll die, and then your privacy is.
Right. Get all archived, and you'll have a QR code on your tombstones, on your scan that, read it all up. And it's all
But then
good.
the driving Miss Daisy scene will never happen, right? Him learning how to read.
Okay, 10 points to Gryffindor for whoever finds one enough.
Moving.
Are you near or under gutter?
And I'm here because it's the only way I can get this to work.
Would you like to remove the text on the whiteboard?
Oh yeah, that might make sense, huh? Do you guys want some hashtags in the middle? I don't know if that adds to your learning experience or takes it.
I just love your Twitter.
I like dinosaurs a lot. A lot. Actually, I don't think I dinosaur a lot. So what time is it?
Pass.
About 2 minutes behind.
Oh, 14 minutes, I'm gonna write this. Yeah, I lose time. Well, here's the timer.
You ever read the Robin Hood books? The children's book. And hidden all throughout all his books are pterodactyls. And you have to find them. Well, if you look closely, like the pigeons, they're all common chimneys. Where there's a pigeon inside a pigeon, pterodactyl. That's a wall.
Anyone have tips for making sure that this and what's going on in my screen with physical presentations or success?
Why, it's not the same?
Go to the next slide.
Well, I did, but on this screen it's not. Yeah, it gives me the interview here, and then my notes are here.
Right, and you don't want us to see it.
It does. I have the, doesn't it?
Discuss amongst yourselves.
It has it, but it's
I
not like
wouldn't
you
worry
in
about it if
PowerPoint
it
where
doesn't
have,
bother
like,
you.
little windows
Wait,
and
hold on, I
everything.
might have figured this out.
It's another learning.
The reason I use Google Slides for this is because I wanted to be able to play on my afterwards and have it easily shared. I don't know.
They're out at,
I was going to go yesterday too. When I got
Trader
here.
Joe's.
I was on Kauai, which is a bit smaller island, and we were at this spot called Mini Beach. First day of dates were like 30, 40 dollars.
I was looking for real.
High school?
Middle school. From middle school.
No, did you go to high school?
Oh, no. I went to high school in Orange County.
Alright, you just see if I can stay.
Okay. Yes.
I have a lot of respect for teachers. I have to say, I work in the technology.
Welcome to
world.
school.
Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. This session is EdSec, the crash course in privacy and security for the classroom. I'm gonna go ahead and apologize beforehand because I'm exhausted and I had like 20 hours of flying yesterday. So I'm just trying to hold it together, but I figured that we're gonna have a more informal conversation about some of the things that I wanted to share and teach you about. So would go to some of the biggest hacker conferences in the world and see these really amazing, smart people who like to rip technologies apart for breakfast. And they're thinking, hey, well, we're going to go hack into this car, or we're going to see if there's a vulnerability in this glucose pump that might actually kill you if somebody goes and exploits it. And that's cool, and that's great, and that's flashy stuff, but what about the rest of us who have our own security and privacy concerns, and maybe aren't worried about our Google cars driving off the interstate because we don't even have Google cars yet, or we're not worried about our incident pumps because they don't have them. So that being said, I spend a lot of time looking at what happens in the security community, and I think a lot about some of the implications that that has on education for all of us. Oh, come on, slide. So one of the things I've said a lot about 2014 is that 2014 has been the absolute year of the hacker. Can anyone think of any companies besides this group here that have reached? Well, not all companies, but there was Sony, there was iCloud, there was Target, there was Kickstarter, Yahoo got hacked at some point. Yes, Home Depot got it too. And in addition to that, we had some other things happen on the web that were really interesting. So this part here is the logo for Heartbeat. It's a really big vulnerability that popped up in April. And instead of being the kind of vulnerability where someone actually breached into a system, it was actually the design of a certain open source SSL library that had a hole in it. And it was a hole that just happened to be used millions and millions of places all over the web. The same thing happened for this here, which is Shell Shock that came out in September. So we had a really good mix of companies getting hacked by black hat hackers, the guys who are malicious and who really don't have anything good going on in their minds when they want to go after all this information that is something useful. And then we had a whole army of white hat hackers, the good guys who have the skill set, but who are constantly digging around in the internet and saying, okay, there's a hole in this, we should probably fix it so the whole internet doesn't fall down and break and tumble into pieces. There were a few really interesting things that we got to learn just by watching these things happen as well. So with Heartbleed and Shell Shock, we actually saw code flaws and infrastructure problems. But if you look at what happened at Target and Home Depot, those were really coordinated attacks. That was malware, that was code breach, that was network breach. Pretty hard to do stuff, sometimes. When you look at something like what happened to iCloud, it wasn't really a brute force attempt to break through code. I'm sure everyone remembers in September when we all went online and we suddenly discovered all of our favorite celebrities did not have their code on. That had nothing to do with actually someone breaking into code. It was a group of dedicated people who said, okay, we're going to target this select audience and we're going to figure out whatever we can to actually get into their accounts and compromise their information. That's pretty scary stuff. I mean, thinking about the internet, you don't usually think that there's a whole group of people who might be after someone like me and might be trying to break into my private accounts. But that's one of the things that that particular incident really taught us. And with Sony, I don't think we actually know what happened yet. We don't know which team broke in. We don't know if it was Korea. We don't know if it was a Sony insider. We don't know if it was a combination of two. But one really interesting thing to take away from that, I think, is just that when we saw all of the information about the company come out, we realized how much they didn't do for security. I mean, they had passwords stored in Microsoft Word documents and spreadsheets. And I know from talking to educators that's something that might happen once in a while. But one of the things that I want to make sure that I leave everyone with is things that you can use that maybe don't cost a lot of money, but keep you from being in the same position. So, before we get started, I kind of want to tell you a little story. In security, we have this system that we use to track common vulnerabilities and exposures. So when you have researchers going out around the web looking for bugs, sometimes they dig them up and they will send them over to CERT, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team. And they work out of Carnegie Mellon and they coordinate with the federal government as well. And they have a common vulnerability score system. someone finds a vulnerability and reports it, and it goes through the process and gets disclosed to the company, what happens is it's assigned a score. So maybe it's a moderate thing, or maybe it's a critical thing. Maybe it's something small, but it's important enough that everybody needs to know about it. So all of the technologies that are relying on this get patched. So this CVE number is actually the number for hardening. But the really interesting thing that happened this year is that we security people almost broke our own system. So if you look at this number, this is 4 digits. And the thing that we broke, the thing that happened, is that this year, we, in September, we had passed the number 7,000. Well, if we went past 9999, if there were 10,000 security vulnerabilities reported and pushed out through the system, the whole thing would break because of only 4 digits. So the weird thing is that we had to go, run, and hurry and put another digit on this. And it took a lot of people a lot of time to do it. But what I think is interesting about that, and you might as well, is when you look at something like this and realize there are only 4 digits there and you have to expand 5 to 5, and you hear about all of these security issues that happen all over the web this year, you might think that, oh my gosh, there's been a sudden explosion of vulnerability. What are we going to do? The web is falling apart. And it's not necessarily that we have more. They've always been there. We've talked about adding the extra digit to this system for some time now. But because of the kinds of vulnerabilities we've seen and all of the conversations we've all had about privacy, it just seems like this is something that's more in front of our faces than it ever really has been before. So I just happen to think it's kind of cool. I don't know if you guys think it's cool, but I think it's kind of cool. These security people almost broke our own system, which is pretty much our job anyway. But it just amazes me that more people than ever found and dug and reported things out and made the web safer. But there's this weird contradiction where everyone else who uses it and maybe doesn't get to see this part might feel like it's falling apart for one another. So one of the things that I usually like to bring up, people usually ask, where do the holes in the web come from? And I talked a little bit about that. How did it get in there? Well, the fun way that I like to explain this is I sometimes like to say the web is a set of protocols that are stuck together by duct tape and glue and paper clips and sticky notes. And most of us probably don't have a way of checking what color sticky note and what kind of duct tape, and if it's the good duct tape, the strong adhesive. We have no way of looking at the underlying tools. We go, we access websites, we play around, but we don't really know what's going on under the hood. So when you're trying to think about how do these holes get in there, I like to think of it in terms of building a house. The only difference between a website or a code base and the physical world that we stand in is really that we can't see this. There's a lot of underlying architecture and a lot of work and a lot of decisions you make. When you build a house, for example, you have to decide how big your house needs to be. You have to decide what materials you're going to use. You have to decide whether you're going to put the toilet next to the kitchen sink or not. Could be a good idea, could be a bad idea. But you do this, you make the same decisions with code. So when you choose a language, when you choose a specific framework, you're making decisions that are going to impact the stability of your site and the stability of the accounts and the information that you're keeping. Sometimes when people build websites, we make bad decisions, and we see that happen quite a bit. And sometimes there are flaws in the websites that we don't even know exist. One way that I like to look at it, and that I have explained it to kids before, is I'll say, okay, imagine you're building a brick house. Maybe you didn't lay the foundation right way, and you have no way of knowing. Maybe you are putting bricks around the bottom, and something's wrong with your mortar. Maybe when you got it from the manufacturer, they didn't have the right amount of chemicals in it. But what ends up happening is you have a flaw that's in the inherent structure of your building. And if you live in San Francisco like I do, and there's a little earthquake first, and you look around and you're like, oh, there's a hole in my building. Where did this come from? How did that happen? You find out there is a vulnerability in the structure. But if you live somewhere like where I grew up in Virginia, you might never have an earthquake or might never have a situation where that particular flaw or design vulnerability comes to light. That's pretty much the same thing that happens happens with websites. But you can't see it. It's hard to figure out, especially if you, like me, are a total heavy dropout and you don't spend all day clicking around a terminal and trying to figure out what these technologies are really made out of. So, I know there have been a lot of conversations going on about digital literacy this weekend. When you think about digital literacy, what are some of the biggest things that you prioritize in teaching your students? Anyone?
So, yeah, what are we, so, I mean, often, we talk about, legacy, so your digital footprint, right? But this is a space where we think that we can't remove you at all. And so, I'm thinking from the very beginning about legacy, and so legacy trumps, because legacy and reputation trumps security and privacy. Like, what do I care as a kid? Security and privacy. But I do care about my rep. And so, the idea that I'm building my legacy, I'm building how people will see me and perceive me, and that, I really can't create two identities. I think this idea of, I have my personal accounts and I have my professional accounts, but I don't have the same name. Like, it's me, right? And you're going to see it
Yeah.
all. So I'm going to have this identity, I'm going to have this legacy, and how am I going to conduct myself in a permanent space? That's the conversation we have with kids. And from that we get into, best practices and privacy and security and all of that, but really it starts with reputation.
I would argue that, because that's an interesting concept, I would argue that it is possible to have two identities.
Oh, yeah.
But the problem is you have to maintain this thing, this operational security, right at the beginning. You can't let the two streams cross. And there's a lot of evidence with kids online. It's interesting. Dana Boyd, who is a writer and she does a lot of work with teens and on social media, she has looked at the ways that teens maintain their privacy and separate these spheres, basically by encoding their language. So they speak in code, and they speak in all of these terms. What is that word? Is it fleek? And there's that other one, they? They speak in these words, and we may not exactly know what they mean, unless we Google them and are horrified for our younger siblings. But it's interesting to see how they're able to maintain that. I would say in terms of permanence, there's some argument you can remove stuff from the internet, but I pretty much agree with you. What are some of the other things you think about?
I just want to ask you, kind of challenge on that for a little bit. Because, I mean, yes, I have the same conversations with kids, but telling a 12-year-old, hey, this is going to be, when you're 30, this is really going to matter. I don't find that argument I don't find that really resonates either. And I haven't found a good way to
I actually maintain that a lot of these kids, by the time they get into a situation where they're applying for jobs, the people on the other side of the field have already been through all of this, and they have their Facebook moments and things like that, so they're going to better understand the relationship. And that's going to be more and more as we go along. So it's going to fade out eventually.
Yes. There's
still Google people, but
There was an article that I read a couple of weeks ago that said, that in 10 years, it's not going to matter how many keg stands and
Code switching.
Inappropriate pictures you have out on the internet, because the people hiring you will have their own keg stands and inappropriate.
So basically,
and the
because it
definition of
happens,
inappropriate is going to change too.
so basically because everyone has that knowing.
Shocked
Yeah.
and appalled.
Bill?
The other, when you kind of put that out there, that you got legacy and reputation, public security, pricing, I think one of the, if we position those as binaries, then it always would be attention. If we position those as actually part and parcel of the same thing, then I think we can have a more effective conversation about it. And I think that, I don't think that actually people will ever get sake of seeing other people do stupid things, and I will change
No,
that.
that's YouTube's whole business model.
Yeah, I mean, I will change that opinion when we no longer have tablets. But given that that's actually the one segment of the newspaper industry that's still actually getting strong. So, I mean, but this is where, I mean, if we frame this well for people, and actually, you know, yeah, you can actually have, you know, reputation, privacy, security, and legacy, all part and parcel of the same thing. And so if you can actually have a better reputation if you're more secure, if you know how to share the secret, you can actually have people knowing, you can have the people that you want to know about the things that you're doing that you roll up. And I mean, just finding a way to frame it for kids, you know, in a way that actually lets them see what their legacy can be and how to create that. I think it's just a conversation. I think if we allow them to outsource where their legacy lives, then yeah, they will never have control over it. If we actually start talking about how they can deal with it, I think it's important.
So, on the side of the web that I sit on in the Silicon Valley, I see a lot of people make a vow of clothing for the web. There's a lot of talk about remixing content, and creating content, and publishing content. And I see a lot of emphasis even online where teachers want to teach their students how to build their digital footprint, how to have a presence. The things that I see most are community sharing, composing, remixing. But it makes me really sad because security is all the way down here. It's like the ignored little stepchild or something that nobody wants to talk about. And it kind of makes sense. Security is not easy. They don't make it easy. I yell at the people in security constantly about not making it easy. But for me, when I look at everything that's going on in the world, I feel like we're really missing an opportunity. We are encouraging students to go online and to create their voices and to put themselves out there, but then we don't give them the tools to actually protect that and make sure that someone else doesn't access an account or take down a page or put up content that is going to reflect poorly on what they've achieved or their reputation. So that being said, one of the things that I think about a lot, in the Silicon Valley, we have CTOs that run companies, right? So these guys are the chief technology officers. They decide what you use, how you use it. Look at the classroom. I see a lot of teachers who are the CTOs of their own classroom. Sometimes they have agencies who tools that they want to use. Other times they have tools pushed down on them from administration. But either way, as the CTO of your classroom, you are in charge of a lot of information. And I think one of the important things to pass down to students is that with technology, just like any other nice thing worth having, there is some proper upkeep that you have to do. For me, the upkeep is security. I think a lot of people don't like to do because, like I said, we make it hard. One of the things that I have thought about a lot this year, getting reached online is not a when situation anymore.
Just, if I can interrupt. but
Yeah, go ahead.
okay. So, yesterday, literally, I saw one of the students put in stuff in a locker,
Mhm.
right? And adults don't get to use lockers anymore, right?
Mhm.
Whatever. And I would love to have a locker, I mean, in multiple places. And I was just wondering, how about the analogy of the locker to your online, I mean, there's a combination. If you
Yeah.
get trash, you put valuable stuff in there. If you really want your best friend to know the combination, maybe.
Don't share it with your best friend. Never
No,
share it
but
with your best friend.
you know what I mean? So,
No, I think that's,
so
I think
have
that's a pretty
students in
apt
schools
way
been
of looking
dealing
at it.
with this issue in a physical sense, and this is the virtual sense. It's your online locker.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's something if you bring it to kids that way as well, then they'll get it because that's something that they're used to. One of the biggest problems I think we have with technology sometimes is that we don't liken it enough to the things that are around us in the physical world. So when I talk about online security, people say, oh, that's hard. Well, you put a lock on your house, you have a key fob to get into your car, it's the same thing. You're not going to use the same key to get into your house, to get into your car, to get into your closet, to get into your desk drawer. You have multiple keys for multiple things. So likening it in that way is definitely important, definitely helpful. All All right, time for me to try to switch the slide again. I am so sorry.
We've done it before.
So one of the things that I should supplement, one of the things that's important about thinking about security is the element of privacy. So when it comes to students, it's vital to teach them that security is the thing. It's the set of procedures we use to keep their information private. But when we're talking about kids in the classroom, why do we even need privacy? Why is it important? For me, when I look at what happens in schools, I think about learning, and I think about how kids need to be in a place where they feel like they're free of judgment when they fail, because learning involves a lot of failure. Giving students room to fail, actually, to me, and giving them a private place to do that when they're online, when they're playing in a photo, when they are creating and drafting things is incredibly important. Does anyone have any examples of maybe in the classroom where you've given a student privacy and you've had a moment where they've been able to shine or thrive? I'm thinking in terms of, personally, I used to have a really hard time with math. And I had one math teacher who would call me out in front of the classroom and very publicly point out that I could not do a certain thing. The next year, I had a different math teacher. And when she recognized that I was struggling in the classroom, instead of making me the example, she would pull me aside and in a way, in a class where other students might not be able to figure out that there was no way I was going to be able to intersect any of these things because I couldn't get the whole concept of variables. Are there any examples for any of you where that's happened? One of the things to keep in mind is we're doing a lot more of our education online. We're doing a lot more of our lives online. And when we're taking our students online, we're tracking a lot of information about them. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room remembers the way we have standardized testing information. We have databases full of private information about students. And we have a whole entire generation of kids who pretty much are going to have everything they do from the time they're born and their first picture goes up on Facebook, pretty much the end of their natural life, will have a piece of metadata attached to it. So I think something that's really important about this as well is when you give kids a place online where they know that their privacy is going to be protected. They know that they can learn things and they're not going to be judged by other people. They have a little bit more room to be free. Because the minute a kid realizes they're being watched or something's going to go online, they might not use the word they actually wanted to use in blog posts. They might not say the thing they're actually wanting to say. If they know, for example, that you can see them practicing math problems, and all of their math practice data is going to end up attached to their report card page, but it can be seen forever and ever and ever, they're probably going to feel a little bit more pressure to do better, potentially achieve, to do other things because they know they're being watched, and that, yeah.
When we did student teaching in college, we got a video tape, and it is stunningly embarrassing the first time you see yourself and all of the tics and I know, you know. I mean, but it's so powerful to do that. You just need to do it in a safe place.
Yeah, well, that's something really interesting, actually. There was an initiative from the Gates Foundation not very long ago where they wanted to spend about $5 billion putting video cameras in every classroom. I don't know how you feel about that as teachers, and I would love to hear it, but I feel like if I personally had a camera looking at me every single day while I was doing my work, from writing on a whiteboard to typing out something to sending an email to interacting with other people, I might not feel very comfortable in my job. Anyone? Exactly. I think about it like we watch TV and there are all of these reality shows that are out there, right? So there are people who sit there and watch all of this footage and cut the best clips. Are you really going to go back and watch a whole 8-hour school day? I mean, you might be able to flag a little piece of information where you see a light clip for a student. But do we really need all of that? All of the time?
But
I mean, think about it, like,
I know someone.
No, but I mean, it also depends on what it's going to do with it. I mean, like you said, having that data available to me when I want it is valuable. Having it up on a screen somewhere where other people can watch it is not. So the tool itself isn't necessarily good or bad. It's all in use.
yeah.
So if I was here and I had Google last on and I was watching you and you weren't sure about the video clip you were about, I mean, that would shift the dynamic of each thing.
Right.
And I think that the potential for surveillance is almost chilling enough to where the actual surveillance becomes less necessary. And I think that's where, I mean, I think Jesse, this is what you might be kind of getting at, but
Feel my thunder, Bill.
what,
The potential for surveillance, I think, is everywhere. We all walk around with hunting cameras on us every day. I've got at least 8 on me right now, cameras.
You don't put a sticker on that thing?
Well, and
Put a
that's
sticker on that
and
thing.
that's the thing. You don't put stickers on there, but the sticker, the sticker.
No, you don't need to put a sticker on that. No, because that's.
But the sticker doesn't stop the microphone. So we're all standing around, even if we put a sticker
Huge.
over our webcam, we still have a live microphone right here, and the potential for surveillance is always there. Now, unless we're going to.
Well, you guys are 10 miles from Lower Merion, Pennsylvania, where this played out.
Yeah, so,
There's also the problem with the finding surveys where people say they're worried about being security. And then they go putting all the data they can so they can use with Gmail, for example, where Google finds out everything that's in there so they can see the ads. They throw all kinds of information to Facebook and people to have security settings set the right way and how they go. There's all sorts of ways that people make themselves available and still worry about security. I mean,
the people who freak out, well, Google is stealing all of my data. I'm going to send you this through my Gmail account. I'm going to send you this article through my Gmail account about how Google is stealing all of your data. So again, it's not the tool that's inherently good or bad. It's how it's used.
Yeah. So one of the things I think, that I like to think about when it comes to some of the things happening in security and student privacy right now is who exactly is going to be going after the kind of data who after? It's probably not going to be these guys because they're actors, they're not actually hackers, by the way. But the kinds of hackers that you see in movies, like that movie Black Cat that just came out, probably not going to be getting into the classroom computer. With that being said, there's a really pervasive attitude that, no one's going to go hack into a bunch of kids' computers. I completely disagree. When you look at some of the information that you as teachers hold on to, and that educators in general hold on to, there are a lot of examples of students actually going after their teachers' passwords, going after their information to change their grades.
I love the one on your blog post about the mom who hacked to change
Yeah,
the kid's grade.
yeah.
That was so awesome. That's like helicopter
She saw
parent
War
on just to
Games
the
as a
extreme.
teenager.
So, in security.
that's carpet bombing as a helicopter parent.
In security, we call this a threat model. And your threat model is comprised of the things or the people or the whatever that are going to be coming after your information and who you're protecting that information from. Parents is actually a really great example. I would argue that because standardized testing is such a high stakes thing, parents will do whatever they can to give their students a foot forward. And I have seen incidents online where there has been a parent who actually hacked into the school system to change
students got access to the student management system through the teacher's password and was changing grades for other students for free.
Yeah, so in the 1980s when I was supposed to do it.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying.
That brings up a really
I'm saying that, and both of them
Matthew
followed
Broderick
her
did it
because-
first.
Not because of anybody doing any hacking sort of thing, it was because the teacher wrote their password down on a piece of paper
Opportunity.
somewhere, and, so like, we're not talking hacking, I wish they were really.
Well, there's more, we'll get into that. That's an interesting example though, because the behavior of, I want to change my grade to something that it's not, is not a new behavior. And a lot of the things that we talk about as hacking, the behavior's always been there. People for a long time have tried to open up notes that they're not supposed to see. People have tried to forge documents. People have tried to change information.
Teachers as a whole are terrible.
Yes, I agree.
Half the teachers right now have all their IEPs in class but they're going to be
No,
I want
the
that
conversations
flash
I've
drive.
had over, well, we can use Google Drive, but we can't go ahead and have, don't put a draft of your IEP there. So where does it live, right?
It lives on-
It's in this Word document that's on this flash drive, that's going over our email, which by the way, right?
It's not encrypted.
It's
so
not
secure,
encrypted because
it's
we're
not
using,
HIPAA compliant.
we're using Exchange,
I got
it's
you.
not encrypted, it's not, because that doesn't play well with our filters, we have to, it's that
Even
whole.
in our system though, we provide a secure environment for it, but it's not convenient enough. So
Right.
we export everything
So-
And you bring up-
Word documents and play with it there.
You bring up another point. I think there's so much misinformation out there. Like, you can't put your IEPs in Google Drive, but if you password protect them in a Word document, this is from our State Department, this is what they said. Don't put them in Google Drive, but if you password protect them in a Word document, that's okay, because that makes it secure. No.
Passwords can be broken.
Also, like,
Microsoft Word has these things called 0 days where I can get that information.
also, there's sort of reversible, so.
So whenever I can, I try to read things that might be helpful. There is something that I learned about recently. So I know a lot of people like to use Dropbox, and there's an app called Sookasa, Sookasa. It actually started as an app for mental health professionals and medical providers. So it's this invisible encryption layer that sits on top of Dropbox, but it protects everything in a really, really smart way. And because HIPAA regulations are a lot stronger than FERPA, compliance is pretty much built
We
in.
use Boxworks.
Yeah. So that being said, we've established we've got parents who are trying to hack into schools. We can think of plenty of examples where kids have hacked into different systems. There are other people out there who have interest in hacking into schools too. In 2012, I'm sure you may have heard of Anonymous. It's one of those hacktivist groups that just likes to go around the internet and break into things to make a political point. They actually broke into a school in Steubenville, Ohio, that was in the middle of a really awful high school rape case. So that's an example of politically motivated hacking that you might not really think about being on your radar because that's not something that happens to you. But the moment that one thing happens like that, all of a sudden you may be in your crosshairs. They may be on your radar somewhere. Another thing to think about, I don't know if anyone here works for a major research university, but there are tons of examples in major research universities that have a focus on technology and science and medical innovation, where there is surveillance and hacking from military groups in China and all other places in the world trying to steal secrets. So if you work at the university on a research project, what you have to do to keep your research private and your students' information private and all of these things secure is going to be a lot different than what you have to do as a K-12 educator. But it's not just, hey, no one cares about kids' homework. There's other stuff going on out there on the web that we have to really think about. I would say, just to add to that, there are two things that I didn't mention. You have the regular run-of-the-mill hackers on the web, who are sending out phishing emails and malware and all kinds of other stuff. Sometimes with schools, you have aging infrastructure. Typically, your networks are built to filter information and more to watch what students are doing than to really be secure, perimeter, to have a secure perimeter and actually protect what's inside. So if someone gets a virus, or if they get this thing that's been running around called ransomware, that has the ability to wreak havoc on your system and not just shut down your school, but depending on how crazy and how powerful that is, it could potentially shut down 2 schools, a whole network. You could accidentally infect your entire state, depending on how all of this information is tied together. A lot of times, the different viruses and the different wares, as we call them, typically escape detection. It's a lot like, think about it in terms of vaccination. So when you get a flu vaccine, someone has isolated the strain of flu that they think is going to be the one that runs rampant during the year, and they create a vaccine. Antivirus works pretty much the same way, but it only works if the companies who are building the antivirus tools have a sample of the particular malware or ransomware or whatever else is out there to protect you from. And there are plenty of examples where antivirus has completely failed, and where something lurked around on the internet for 5 or 6 years before anybody ever actually was able to find it, sample it, and figure out a way to get around it. So that's something just to keep in mind as well. So when you're online as teachers, what are some of the things that you do to keep your student records or your local accounts safe? Do you have any typical practices that you yourself have enabled, or do you have someone at your school who says, hey, you should probably do this or that? Anyone?
Directly going to answer the question, but it's going to be somewhat related. I'm thinking of student use of accounts and just various apps that require signing in. So let's talk about Google Drive and different apps that require you to sign in in order to save your work. So those devices are logged in with that account all the time, unless for some reason like the iPad updates and you need to log in. Again, the teacher has the password for that account to do it. The students don't have access, and where that's stored probably something. But I'm thinking of student perspective in terms of all of those services that they use that require sign-in, and at elementary level, they're, on top of this,
Yeah.
and they take them home, and, but, in terms of where it's stored on, they're shared with email, like amongst teachers. So, I'm looking at 2 perspectives, and the concern that I have most is for the accounts that the kids are sending into, where there's like a plethora of different services.
Yeah.
And
One of the things that has started popping up is there are some tools that are building single sign-on technologies where you integrate all of these different apps that you use instead of having to manage, 50 passwords per student and they all forget the password and then you spend 45 minutes in your 50-minute period getting people logged in. The single sign-on technologies are something that we use a lot in enterprise and business to help with security. There's a company, Clever, that does data integration. Disclosure, those guys are really awesome, and they're my friends in San Francisco. But they have started building a really strong single sign-on service so that kids and teachers don't have to lose all of this time in the classroom. So there's not really anything out there in terms of like password management that's really great for kids. That makes me really angry and makes me wish I could code because I would love that in a heartbeat. But there's a little teeny trickle of something going on. But really, the problem that the single sign-on solves, not necessarily the security problem, it's more we don't want to lose our class time. And I think that's totally fine. If you want to build something that's awesome, it makes it easier to sign in, but also makes it a little bit more secure for kids, it's fine. It's more usable and it's better than having popsicle sticks and all this other stuff. Go for it.
So I'm going to ask a question that sort of dovetails to that, because Brooke and I, and we're both in Montgomery County, just west of here. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to be proactive to protect access and tools that empower transformative teaching and learning. I just took a new job as a tech director in the district in Montgomery County. And everyone, it's basically like the Wild West, right? So you have every teacher is using Modo, Wikispaces, everyone's using personal Google accounts, kids, teachers, so everyone's all over the place. Sign up for this tool, sign up for this tool, sign up for this tool. I want to bring it all into a fold, right? So like the first one is Google Apps for Education, because then that lets people separate personal versus.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most important things you can do, because you don't want to accidentally send a personal email meant for someone else's eyes only to an entire community.
Right, and part of that is, this is something, so I'm going to ask you to respond to a couple of things.
Okay.
So first, one thing, a takeaway. I know there are 3 people at this table at least. We will encounter the FUD with respect to Google Apps, right? And the more narratives we have from people who know what they're talking about to sort of address some of those concerns, right, and dispel some of those myths, the better. And so having some of that would be great. Then here's this other vision. So when I think about a Chromebook, so if a kid's got a Chromebook, we start going Chromebook. One of the nice things that I really like about Google Apps for Education is the ability to integrate apps with Drive. So I can add that now. And so just one kid, using your school username and password to sign in. And Google's giving more and more tools for me to say yes and no. Yes, you can add this app, or no, you can't. So I can review the terms of use of Pixel, and I'm like, oh, Pixel actually doesn't store any student data, right? It's just I'm leveraging their software, but everything gets stored in Drive. I'm good with it, right? And so I can review each one of those tools and say yes or no. Brooke, your school's doing this great job of sort of curating this list. Here are the tools we use. There's the privacy policy, one like big general consent form. It's all, crazy talk strategy. But all of it is trying to be proactive so that one day we don't have, is that camera on? You guys recording this?
Yeah.
All right, okay. So I'm just going to be, so there are school districts that I'm really well aware of and have had experience with where it becomes this very restrained environment, right? And I lose the battle. So, well, we have playgrounds. And I know that if you go into the playground, we're going to get hurt. But yet, the playground is an important thing, so you let people go into the playground. And yet, so in this digital space, bad stuff will happen. But it's far, that risk, is far outweighed by the benefit of leveraging these tools. And so, we're trying to do something very proactive here, where we create the strategies and systems and have them in place. But not only empower the tools of today, but I can't have a teacher coming to me and saying, I found this awesome tool. All right, great. Now we have to wait a year before we add it to our clinical list. And we need some kind of mechanism in place to be responsive to that learning opportunity.
And are you speaking specifically to when those tools ask for permission for use for kids under a certain age because they may have?
Well, yeah, I mean, those are 2 different issues, right? There's the really young kids, and that's where focal comes into play. But really, I'm just trying to just enjoy practice.
So I would say in terms of
This was a follow-up video. I saw my I'm curious, there's a lot of tools and people are trying to go through the slides, last class, and feedback to your application. There's a lot of best practices out there, but are those being out as online communities or with
that's one of the things that I think is most important here. So you bring up a very important point.
Yeah, I mean, I asked you several things. One was
strategy for how you're going to look at the concept of privacy, and actually Bill, standing right here, did a really great piece where he outlined some of the ways that you can keep track of privacy policies and really think about what you should think about the implications of what you're using before you bring it into the school. The other side of that is really getting into the actual activity of security. So in terms of password management, I still have here no spreadsheets. Never use spreadsheets. And I'm going to say this because you can go to Google, and I would do it now if you one more time, but you can go to Google, type in a couple of words that look like school words, home
Yeah, I'm like halfway through a blog post on, and I actually don't know if I can actually put this out about a tool used in a large urban school district where the default password is, and what else it puts, so it creates a leaderboard that puts kids' names online, but then the default username and password is extracted from the first and last name.
Mhm. So you
So
can
you
guess it.
actually, their tool generates the means by which you can then get in and hack that. And I'm trying to figure out actually who to talk to about this. Because it's, yeah,
Yeah.
but, yeah, there's this really odd thing.
We just switched to the GAP environment. And it's going to be made mandatory next year for all schools in the district. Because our infrastructure is so antiquated and we're not maintaining, because it's so costly.
It is expensive.
So, what I'm running into now with my students is all of the different things that they log into, because whoever decided the password formula for the school, made it so easy, they're thinking about ways that they can screw over their
I see
friends
this happen all the time.
on their intervention programs because they know all the passwords. It's the same password for
Yeah.
everybody in the school.
So that's one of the things, like, when you're dealing with online privacy, like, the first thing people go after is passwords. Because that's the thing you use to get your hands on data. So in that case, the most important thing is actually to make passwords that are somewhat random, and they're not the kinds of passwords that you would typically remember. But kids do that to each other all the time. Totally not a new behavior. I would say, as educators, the most important tool to use is actually going to be a password manager. Because a password manager like 1Password, LastPass, KeePass, these are awesome tools. I am in love with 1Password because I'm afraid of putting things in the cloud, but I work with hackers, that's why I'm afraid of the cloud. As educators, if you share passwords with other people or other people in the team, LastPass actually allows you to swap them back and forth. Now, when you start using a password manager, it's a little bit crazy because you think, oh my gosh, I don't actually know this one thing that's supposed to get me in my account. It's actually more secure that way. Like, we security people, when we came up with password authentication, I'm apologizing for everybody because we screwed up. Instead of making passwords something that you can use and something that you can remember and something that's easy, every site on the web started coming up with them. To the point, and I love this comic, to the point that all of the best practices that you need to follow and make what you need to use for a password completely incomprehensible. And then when you use 20, 30, 50, 200 different tools, how exactly are you supposed to remember this super long random string of numbers and letters and words and things? It's just completely counterintuitive. So the best tool that you can use to counteract that 100% is going to be a password manager. One of the great things about password managers, in addition to creating strong passwords for you, they can audit your passwords. Some of these companies, when they see a vulnerability pop up on the web, say, hey, time to change your account. You just screwed up this system. And there's a site by someone named Troy Hunt. It's called howitwinphones.com. Sign up your entire school district for it. Because if everyone has accounts and you're logging into things all the time, and that site gets breached, you're all going to get an email. And it will say, change your password. It's the fastest breach notification out there. And the way that this is built is amazing. I mean, basically, you just go look at, it's the equivalent of going and checking Spin, which is the site where all of this password data gets dumped every day. And it checks it for you and just lets you know if you're in the password. It actually will tell you way before most companies even get their hackers together enough to be able to notify you themselves. Another thing to think about is two-factor authentication. So that's not something that education technology companies are good at implementing. If this is something that you want, especially, and I would argue for an LMS or any kind of student information system, and if Clever hasn't, you want two-factor authentication so that you have to have two things in front of you to log in. If someone gets your password, they also have to be able to attack the other thing. That's going to be a great tool for you if you have it. If tools that you would like to have it don't, bus it to them. Tell them, like, sorry, we'd love to pay you money. We'd love to use your tools. But we can't because we need this for what we're doing. And we're going to go with someone who has
So I ask two questions here. One, I'm gonna ask you to go back, just sort of general, your thoughts, educational environment, your last education. And then the second is, two-factor or two-step authentication. So, we've gone back and forth on that and turning that on because it's just, maybe one day if every kid has a device, but then, like here in the shared device environment, right, that authentication's coming in through text message, it's on our phones, I mean, it's like.
It's hard
a
with
nightmare.
kids. So password managers, not something that's really built to be able to use with students. I mean, if your students are around the 13-year-old limit, I think that's okay. But if you're younger than that, you're probably not going to be able to keep your password managers right. That's just the rules of kids. In terms of two-factor authentication, I think it's important to let them know it exists. But there's not really an implementation of that that works for kids yet, which is just dumb. Because how are we supposed to model this for them if we don't even have it ourselves and we're protecting all of this amazing data about them? It makes no sense. That being said, there are some people doing cool stuff with two-factor authentication. I use Google Authenticator because I like it and because I know it works. I used to use something called Authy, and that's another two-factor thing that you can use. What it does, instead of sending you a text message, is you open up an app and it gives you a 6-digit code. And you have 30 seconds to enter that code into the thing to log in. So that's pretty cool. One reason I like using the that's better is that if I get text messages on my MacBook and I'm logging in from my MacBook, that's not really two factors anymore. I can just copy it over from iMessage or from wherever I receive my text messages. There's no point. If my device gets compromised, somebody can walk in and get everything. So it's cool to see these kinds of things happen. Authy is doing some neat stuff with Bluetooth where your phone can talk to your computer and all of the things log in together and you never actually have to type in code, which is really neat. But if you don't have those tools in your education technology environments, you can't protect yourself. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely ask them for it.
One of the things that I have noticed a lot of companies are doing is they're just outsourcing their logins to Google, which is nice because then Google supports two-factor authentication. So that's what, that's one of the things I always tell teachers to do is if there's a login with Google button, use the login with Google button because Google, whatever privacy fears you have about Google, but Google is going to do a much better job keeping your password secure than Joe's server house in some garage in New Jersey that is running this app. That Google will just keep your password a little bit secure.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot. Remember when Facebook opened up for everyone and then suddenly you could just click on the little sign up with Facebook button and all you needed to do was a single sign on that way? Same concept. It's cool to see that happen with Google. I just wish that when you have things that aren't connected to, say you're using some sort of Blackboard thing that has to be important information, and you want to factors because you've had incidents where a student looked over a shoulder or stole a password. You need that, and you don't have it. And most people don't know if they can ask for it, don't know if they have the power to ask for it, but it's definitely something that is necessary, depending on what kind of data that you're messing with.
North Carolina actually just got a statewide internet access management system for single sign-on to two-factor authentication.
That's the fanciest thing I've ever heard.
So when a student enrolls, they get a username and password that they build across Google Apps, syntax directory. There's a whole list, discoveries, and all that.
That's pretty cool. Another thing to think about in terms of security and privacy is actually just the browsing habits on the web. There are a lot of things that happen on the internet that can be attacks that we never see. We have this thing in security called cross-site scripting. Usually when you run into it on the internet, it's called XSS. And you can go to a website that is being attacked through this cross-site scripting, and without you even knowing, you can have someone execute malicious code on your computer. That's some pretty scary stuff. There's not a good way to actually really protect from that. Because how are you supposed to protect yourself with something that you don't know how? So for to make sure that you're going to the correct domains, you're going where you really want to be going. One tool to do that, there's a tool called OpenDNS. So when you're browsing around on the web, you're looking for a website, it will make sure that you are going to google.com instead of Google, Mongo, Yahoo, whatever.com. It's pretending to be Another thing you can do is just keep your web browsers updated regularly. This is really going to depend on what your ecosystem is in your school. If you're using Google Apps and you're relying on your phone, usually you get to auto-update with them. So you don't have to go in and manually update your browser. But if you're using Microsoft and auto-update's not working, or they broke something on Patch Tuesday, you're probably going to have some problems. Or you may not even actually have the power to update your browser because your network administrator has all of the privileges and rights to actually install code on your machine. It really depends. If you have the opportunity to keep your browser updated, do so. Another thing to think about that's not on this slide, so there were some instances in the Google Chrome store where developers create plugins. And people love plugins, and love bookmark lists, and love the browsing things. Well, sometimes they shift from one developer to another. In one case, there was a very well-known developer who sold off his Google extension to someone else who wanted to maintain and run it. And that someone else who happens to be in the business of black hat hacking. And what they ended up doing was loading that already trusted piece of browsing stuff with code that served adware to someone who used it. Get it?
And this is where like the solution of outsourcing password control to Google starts to fall apart. Because when you're actually outsourcing that infrastructure or that basically that key process piece to a service over which you have no control, that has a large number of components running, any of which could be compromised and then you use the backdoor to get into that. At that point, you have actually created your own single point of failure that you don't understand because you don't own the process, and you're plugging other things into it. So, again, I mean, it's convenient and that's great, but it's also, you then, by limiting where you can get hit to just that one place, you make it so everything can get hit to that one place. So, I mean, in Chrome examples, that's a great example, like, and you want to give people flexibility to plug them in, but you also need to be able to actually audit those and know how to audit those and when to audit those. So otherwise, yeah, I mean, you can have one person make a bad decision that makes you like help with it.
Another thing to also think about in addition to plugins, sometimes you give accounts permission from Google. And you give it permission to access a service. So sometimes with Twitter, you might use it to use some social media tools so that you can participate better in an ed chat or something like that. It's really important to go through and actually look at those permissions. I leave a note to self in my password manager in my secure notes that says, hey, the last time you checked this was 3 months ago, do it again. Or I just make a calendar entry. It doesn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes to take it, to have a date with myself in a cup of coffee, and to actually say, okay, we're just going to go do all of that online cleanup crap we don't like doing. Especially, I think, with Twitter and social media, because educators are so active to use it for professional development, the things that can go wrong there if you are not thoughtful about your own personal security for those accounts are just, I have seen incidents where this happened to a friend of mine. She lives in Virginia. 2 teachers in her school district got in a fight, and one logged into the other's Facebook and posted a whole bunch of inappropriate things. And then it was reported to administration, and somebody got put on leave, and somebody else didn't have the tools that they needed to actually be able to prove that they didn't make that post. And it got really nasty. And you can't just call Facebook when you have these incidents and say, hey, can you go ahead and show that I'm innocent now? They're a little busy with 1.5 other billion things on the planet. So they're not, I mean, you have to literally escalate it up to the legal department. And it turns into a really big mess. So that's something else to think about too. When you're doing your passwords and you're making sure you're not using the same username and password everywhere. And you're giving permissions, double check what you're installing if you can, or just don't add it or install it. Because the minute that that's a tool that someone else can use against you, that's scary. Especially if you're not able to retain control of that or to get it back. There's so many places online where our accounts are daisy chained together. There is a technology writer named Matt Cooney. He writes for Wired, Adobe. But he used to write for Wired, and now he writes for somewhere else. But what happened to him is that he has one of those 3-letter Twitter handles that everyone loves. And a teenager decided he was going to take his Twitter handle. The way that the teenager got the Twitter handle was that he accessed his Amazon account, was able to see the last 4 digits of his credit card number, take note of them, reset some stuff over on Amazon, and then the kid turned around and went to his iCloud account, to his Apple ID, and reset everything. And Matt Honan wrote about this. He said, you know, I knew something was wrong because it looked over, and my computer was completely blank, and my phone was completely blank. And I went to mess around, and I called Apple, and it turns out that the attacker had already gone and changed my passwords and changed everything else. Everything that happened, or what ended up happening, is he lost every bit of data on his computer and on his phone. The pictures of his in-laws who had died maybe a year before. The first 2 years of his child's life, all gone. And the way that the attacker was able to be successful is that the last 4 digits of the credit card number that he was able to grab from the Amazon account were the 4 digits that Apple used for identification somewhere else. So one piece of information from the Amazon account gave access to an Apple account. And that's how a lot of these things, you can build these daisy chains online all over the place, which is why it's important to be really mindful about permissions and passwords and all of that. But it's really scary. The other thing I have here is when you're actually surfing public Wi-Fi, there are a few things to keep in mind as well. So I have a friend who did a security research project where he built these little teeny tiny black boxes. I think they cost maybe $40 each for him to build. And he put them all throughout the town that he lived in. He had this idea that his phone was probably leaking details about him that he didn't want other people to know. So for a few weeks, he monitored when he walked through town what information his phone was spilling out about. From those little devices, he was able to figure out what sites he went to regularly, his home address, the networks he tried connecting to, all kinds of other information and little bits of private things that our phones probably shouldn't be leaking out about us, but are. So when I think about that, one of the first things that comes to mind is when you're using a device, especially if it's something that you access personal and work data from, don't ever use public Wi-Fi. Because with public Wi-Fi, if it's not a trusted network, you're at a mall, you are at a Starbucks, anybody who can connect to that network can also intercept some of your traffic and see some of the information going across, especially if it's not encrypted. And that, in terms of student data, is a big problem. One way to get around it, use a VPN. So you can set up a virtual private network. Usually, I have had the luck of working with very smart people who do it for you. There are also services that you can subscribe to that will give you that particular thing to use, or bring your own internet. So I know a lot of people here, you see the Verizon Wi-Fi or the hotspot come up. So when you're in public or you're in a coffee shop, instead of having someone show up and potentially be able to intercept your information and your data, you're on your own private network, and nobody can see it unless they actually are able to get into your hotspot anyway, which is why you don't use it as well. Another tool that I really like a lot, so with education technology and privacy, there's one big problem we have. When you're looking to check whether a tool is secure, whether it's protecting student privacy, one thing to look for is SSL. So that SSL HTTPS, the little thing up here with the lock and the S, that is one way to know whether a program you're using is encrypted or not, or whether the site is using encryption. So I don't usually like to talk about technology in terms of magic, but encryption is a very special case. Encryption, to me, is this, it's like an invisibility cloak. I'm sure everyone's seen Harry Potter. Everyone familiar with Harry Potter and the cloak? So, with the web, we have plain text, and that's what we transmit a lot of data through. So, this is our plain text here. Encryption Encryption is basically some really fancy math that I haven't quite figured out that wraps itself around plain text like an invisibility cloak so that the text is obscured from anybody who might be looking. Now, it's not perfect. There are things that can go wrong with invisibility cloak. For example, put on an invisibility cloak, people can see the moment you disappear and they can see the moment that you reappear. That's basically technology referring that is that it can see when people are talking back and forth or when servers are making calls back and forth. Another thing that can happen that I had a really very nice 8-year-old explain to me, with an invisibility cloak, you put it on, but if you don't close it all the way, your butt will stick out of that. I'm not exactly sure what the technological equivalent of this is, but it's a really good example of encryption strong. It's great. It's math that literally in the 90s and even right now in this moment in our world, people are trying to make legal for no good reason. That's another story.
So that version is,
When it's bad math, then you can track it easily when the numbers aren't random, things like that.
the means of encryption has evolved over the years. The methods and algorithms that are used to do encryption has changed. And who has written it and how it's been validated. So there's been a lot of discussion in recent years about that. Because means of doing peer review to prove that it really works is very labor intensive. And from particularly an open source perspective, that's labor that is out of love and not a lot of people learn it. So there's a lot of good faith that it works. I think it's more and more complicated. Risk that the practice.
It's the everybody nobody problem again. So with open source software, instead of the code being kind of hidden behind the door.
Even with commercial,
Yeah.
you still have to.
With commercial, you have the problem where it's hidden behind the door, you can just check the math.
Whereas
Open source, sometimes people feel that the math is there. There are lots of people's eyes who could be on it, so we're going to trust them. The problem is no one really takes the responsibility and actually does the work to check it out.
With commercial, you don't know if it's actually.
Yeah. The point there about encryption is that it's the thing that we use on the web to ensure privacy. It's the thing that when you encrypt a connection and students searching around the Google or searching around in a site, that's how their search operator, that's how what they're looking at is private and can't be compromised. You don't have the ability to, you do have the ability to attack it, but that's the thing to really look for, and it's not going to happen to most kids that way. There's a tool from the Electronic Frontier Foundation called HTTPS Anywhere. I particularly love that tool because there are some sites that don't have site-wide SSL. They don't have site-wide encryption. They only keep it on a login page. This is actually a problem that Edmodo had about a year and a half ago. You go to Edmodo, you log in, and the login page had the encrypted connection, but the rest of the site, including the spaces where students were doing their homework and having private messages moving back and forth, weren't. So that's a privacy problem because if the kid's sitting in the middle of a coffee shop or doesn't have access to Wi-Fi at home and is doing homework in public and having a private conversation with a teacher through Edmodo or another student, that has the ability to be intercepted or worse. Now, I'm going to say Edmodo fixed this, and they did. Their official answer was that encryption and SSL were available to schools, but they had to opt into it. The fight that we're having broadly as technologists right now is that encryption is the right thing to do to give our users privacy. We just should be doing it. It shouldn't be something we have to opt into. It should be default. But this is a really, really hard thing that we are trying to solve and we are all fighting about amongst ourselves. So that being said, with this Electronic Frontier Foundation tool, it is built in a way that if a site makes a secure connection, it tries to force the secure connection around the rest of the entire site. So if you log on WordPress, for example, HTTPS everywhere will make sure you are all secure all the time. It's really great for that. Originally, I don't remember when it came out, but had built this and said, if you use common social media sites, if you use Facebook, if you use WordPress, if you're active on the internet, this is a thing that you can do. It makes it harder for your data to be tracked. It also keeps what you're doing more private. Yes?
So, because you have a store of events that highlight the issue, and I was wondering, do you blog about this? Is there a teacher resource page for, guess what, this happened in New Mexico, and maybe, you know, so for people who are concerned about this at schools, have a resource?
It's a thing that I keep an eye on, but the problem is that there aren't enough eyes looking at this issue. So when I go to the security community, I say, hey guys, like we have millions of kids passing through the public education system who have no way to opt out of this data being tracked if they're in school. Can you poke around to make sure it's secure? Can you help us with your technological skills raise the funds? There's not really one good centralized place to go, and it's actually not something that education, technology, blogs, and media like to talk about either.
Sure.
Because there's this, I feel there's this pervasive attitude that if you criticize technology in education, even if you criticize, hey, this needs to be more secure, somehow you're against it, and that's it.
So CSPR, for example,
Okay, not
computer scientist for professional response, you know, it's the social good aspect of CSPR.
right.
I mean,
It's something-
EFF is, I send the money, I mean, personally,
Yeah.
but that's.
The EFF covers things once in a while, but they typically cover, you know, when a school district requests the ability to access all of their students' social media passwords, like what happened, you know. There's not really one good place for all of this. It's an awareness issue that we really need to bring up and we really need to fuss more about.
There's kind of a bell curve that goes with it too, because at some point, things get harder or more difficult, and the dividends on return get smaller and smaller. People want to
Well, it's the, you know, schools that were early adopters and wired their schools were, you know, champing at the bit when Wi-Fi, you know, said, why do we have all these holes in the walls? So, you know, it's, you know, you can't win them all.
So one of the things that I think is really important and that we all tapped into is how do we model this for our students? There aren't a lot of good tools that we can use. There's no student-based password manager to help them keep things straight. There aren't student-specific security things that are out there. So there are a few ways in the classroom that we can actually model this. One of the things I think about a lot, and I did this when I was at Virginia Tech, I made my students show me proof that they changed their passwords at least once a semester. And you can do this a lot of ways. If you're in a K-12 classroom, you can make it a small extra credit opportunity. I mean, I am not beyond bragging or writing people in cookies and cupcakes. Say, okay, well, if you change your password and it fits all of these rules that I've given you, you get a cupcake. Little, but it does say, hey, wait a second, we have to take a moment. We have to step back and show kids this is important, literally by integrating it into part of their classroom responsibilities. Another way to do it, kind of fun with this, is doing quick security checkups. So most hacks that are out there are not technological brute force attacks. They are kinds of opportunity. If you don't have a passcode set up on your phone, and your phone has access to your email, and you're not looking, and a student wants to get out of something, they're just going to pick up your phone and send an email, and you're not going to know unless you look at your sent messages. So keep a passcode on this. And keep a passcode, tell your students to keep a passcode on their iPads, on their phones as well, so that you don't have a classroom management problem where you have one kid grabbing another kid's iPad because they look exactly the same, and changing homework or deleting assignments. I've seen so many reports online, teachers saying, help, my kid worked on this for like, you know, the entire semester, and another kid walked over and deleted the entire project. It's really sad, but one way to prevent that is to actually use the PIN code. As an educator, if you're using a MacBook or you have a PC that you rely on, set up a screensaver. Set up a quick key or a hot corner where the second you walk away from your computer, you tap that, and when you walk away, it's protected. The kid has to know your password. One way to do a checkup on that is just to walk around the room while kids are having any time and working, and look over their shoulders, or see if there's an opportunity for you to maybe take over control of their device. if you can. I have a friend who does this and has little cards that says, I could have hacked you, but I didn't. Pretty funny. Sticky notes, same thing. You can even do it where you walk around the room, and if someone's devices are out and they're not protected, you leave them a sticky note and say, everyone who had a sticky note that was perfect, see me after class. And have a more private discussion about it that way. But making sure that at least the physical integrity of devices isn't compromised, something really easy to check, and it's a really good attitude to build with students too, because they'll do it to each other. They'll say, haha, I could have hacked your homework, or you don't have your passcode on, that's not good. It doesn't completely alleviate the problems of, hey, here's my passcode, you can go on my device and do X or Y, but it does help mitigate some issues. Another thing you can do, I talked about phishing a little bit. There's all kinds of crap, I don't have a better word for it, there's all kinds of crap that comes into your inbox. And sometimes you click and you think that it's a password reset, and it's not. It's actually a malicious site trying to steal your credentials. One thing you can do as a classroom is to just take a phishing quiz. There are tons of security companies who put these quizzes online where they will take an email that's a malicious email and say, okay, is this a real email or is this fake? Once you actually get kids in the mindset of looking, for typos, looking at the header of an email, once they know and once you know, you're more aware of how these things happen and you're better prepared. It's something you could do on a Friday, probably in 10 or 15 minutes. You could do a brief show of hands thing, where you throw up an email on the screen and say, okay, do we think this is a real email? Do we think it's a fake email? Let's go through it and analyze it and see what it's about. I've seen these conversations be really hilarious and ridiculous, and I've seen them go completely the other way, but it's worth trying because there are people out there who have access to the newest, craziest techniques of some of these attacks, and being able to identify them is going to be the difference for your students in the future, and for you, being secure and not being secure. Another way, and this is going to be a little bit harder to actually implement, depending on how you manage devices, just make sure that students are somehow involved in regularly updating or recognizing that they need to update their devices. I remember when Apple devices started getting pushed out to schools, and it was a pain to get the updates all together. And now, with some of the later operating systems, everything auto-updates. But letting kids know, hey, we just had a new operating system come out. Or, hey, we just updated this. Let them know that's part of the upkeep that they have for their devices. Make it part of, even if it's on Friday. Friday's the day of the week that you spend 5 minutes hitting that little button, clogging up school Wi-Fi, and downloading everything, that's fine. But getting kids used to these little things is incredibly important so that when they are no longer in school, it's something that comes to mind. Some of the security tools we have now might not work the same way in 10 or 15 years. But at the same time, it is more of a mindset. It is, I have to take care of my devices. I have to take care of my online identity. I have to take care of all of these different parts because that's just how it works. That's part of being a digital citizen. You have a responsibility to take care of your online privacy and your online tools and securing your email, not just for you, but for all of the people that you're in contact with. All of the people that you could be in contact with, and all the things that you want to do in the future. I am so sorry about this side situation. I feel like I owe everybody cookies. So, we talked a little bit about some of the frameworks that you can use. I mentioned, so Bill, his blog has a really, really great post about funnymonkey.com, or is it .org? .com. So he has a really great post that outlines some of the things in terms of privacy policies and FERPA and COPA and the way that sites talk about themselves and whether who maintains control of data, who doesn't maintain control of data. That's a really, really important aspect of privacy. Also a little bit of a security issue as well. With that being said, when you're trying to evaluate whether a tool is going to protect student privacy or protect your privacy as an educator, there aren't a lot of things you can do because there's a lot of invisible framework under there. So you can check and see if it uses SSL or HTTPS. You have to read the privacy policy. They write those things and they are awful. I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but privacy policies are a necessary evil as an educator, because you're not just responsible for what you use an app for. You're responsible for what your students are doing as well. Not every account that you sign up for is going to run on the same things. You may not own one kind of content when you put it into an application, but if you use a competing application, you might retain the rights to everything. Once you hand over data, that's it. You're not always going to be able to get it back. So if you're testing out something in your school, don't hand over live student data. Have a set of dummy data to use before you decide whether you're going to adopt it or not, just to see what it looks like or how it works. Once you hand it over, you may not be able to get it back.
So as far as arts policies go, can you talk a little bit about, so a lot of when you deal with data, say that you're granting them a local license or some form of, like, a local license for them to transmit your data under, so that they can do that, what the password is doing. So there's certain words to be aware of, or do not look for.
So there's certain legalese that you always see about who retains the rights to, or if, in the event of a sale, merger, data acquisition, look for that and see what happens. But also, if you're an educator, your entire school district is thinking about adopting a tool, you have power, you have rights. And only 7% of cases, school districts actually fight and ask or request or even realize that they can keep the rights to their data. The company doesn't get to own it. That is a request that you can make. You can specify how it's stored, how it's transmitted, and you can specify where it goes. And a lot of people don't recognize that that is a right you have, or that's a thing you can ask for, or that's a thing you can do in contract. But you do have power there. In some cases, you will be able to comply somewhere if it really depends, but it does not hurt to ask. So, does that help?
Yeah, I was thinking also, like, using like Box, or Dropbox, one of the things that they say, like, who would be the rights of that, but he's granting them permission to transmit the data amongst their servers, they provide services for the payment. And I was just wondering, because, this is something I was just wondering if there are certain terms that, when it's phrased this way, that's perfectly fine, but if it's phrased a different way, that's not.
Sometimes it just really depends. And a little bit of it is just the legalese too. Like, they're not always going to use the same words. When I see the words commercially viable security and commercially viable privacy all the time, what that actually means is so crazy. So it's something to look out for. Like, yeah, you have to give them permission to transmit things from the cloud at you. If you're signing up for an enterprise account or there's a payment agreement, you do have the power to change it. But if it's premium, you're probably not going to be able to do very much. The only other thing I really have to add there is just pay attention to the terms of service. Because there are a lot of instances where for COPA compliance, you can't use it unless you're 13. And sometimes it's completely up to the teachers. Sometimes they find a way around it, sometimes they don't. But companies can terminate accounts and pull data anytime they want to if they're found in violation of terms. One thing that's really important to keep in mind with Google Apps, Google Forms aren't allowed to collect username and password fields at all, ever. Google has a bot that will delete that spreadsheet. I have seen this happen on Twitter so many times where an educator wanted to build a project and wanted to create usernames and passwords for everyone, and it comes back a week later and says, Google, you're a jerk, I'm a teacher, you deleted my project. When really the problem wasn't Google, the problem was there were terms there. The terms of Google Forms say this, and nobody paid attention. So that's something to really keep in mind as well. So that being said, if there are any extra questions or anything like that, I'm more than happy to take them. But our time is pretty much up. We made it to the end. Here's Art Nose Cut. And thank you all for coming. I'm so sorry for being a little spacey because of all of the flying and travel I did. But I'm more than happy to Oh, Siri says hi.
Bill, Brooke and I are gonna fill